Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving deep into the core tenets of interpersonal influence. And honestly, this stuff is an absolute game changer. Think about the most charismatic, persuasive person you know. You know the type, right? When they walk into a room, they don't just talk, they seem to effortlessly orchestrate the entire social dynamic. It looks like pure magic, but behavioral science tells us a very different story. We're actually making thousands of tiny, microscopic communication decisions every single day. And the crazy part, most of us are getting the most critical ones completely wrong. So today, we're going to break down a totally fascinating, highly structured framework from our source text that reveals exactly how masterful influence is actually built from the ground up. We're going to treat this material like a true masterclass curriculum, peeling back the layers of how we communicate, how we read others, and most importantly, how we manage ourselves. So, let's just start with a really fundamental question. What actually stops us from truly influencing others? Because we usually think it's an external problem, right? We assume, oh, I just didn't have the right pitch, or I didn't use the perfect vocabulary, or maybe I didn't have enough compelling data. But what if the barrier isn't external at all? What if the real obstacle is entirely internal, rooted deep in our own psychological blind spots? Just imagine sitting in a high-stakes meeting and suddenly getting fiercely defensive over a super minor piece of feedback. That instinctual emotional reaction, it completely derails your persuasion. Boom, you've lost them. The source material we're unpacking today provides a direct, unflinching answer to this tension, and it gives us a precise roadmap for overcoming these invisible mental barriers.
Here is our masterclass curriculum for today. We're hitting 5 distinct steps. 1, the power of positive mind. 2, the narcissistic urge. 3, emotional radar. 4, selling adjustments. And 5, irresistible questions. Let's dive in. Section 1, the power of positive mind. This is our foundation. Now, the source text positions this positive mind not just as some fleeting happy mood, but as an absolutely mandatory, overarching foundation. Listen, we are not talking about toxic positivity here. We're not talking about forcing a fake smile. We're talking about achieving a baseline mental state of neutral, unshakable stability. Before you can learn any external skills, literally, before you can read a room or deliver a killer pitch, you have to harness this cognitive baseline first. Think of it like a giant shock absorber for your brain. In a high-pressure negotiation, the very second things get tense, our amygdala wants to trigger that classic fight-or-flight response. A positive mind acts as a mental firewall that completely prevents that cognitive hijacking. It keeps you grounded, receptive, and totally calm. It is the absolute prerequisite state required to master interpersonal communication. Without it, the engine of influence just isn't going to start.
Moving right along to Section 2, the narcissistic urge, our internal enemy.
The author definitely doesn't sugarcoat this concept. They specifically demand that we, quote, overcome the narcissistic urge. It's a pretty provocative phrase, isn't it? But it targets a rather uncomfortable truth about human nature. Our default setting in a conversation is almost always, well, self-centered. Come on, we've all been there. You're sitting in a meeting, someone is talking, and you are entirely ignoring them because you're mentally rehearsing the absolute masterpiece of a point you're about to make next. That right there, that is the narcissistic urge in action. It's this constant, distracting obsession with how we're performing, what we're going to say next, and how we're being perceived. The text frames this as an active, daily, internal battle against the ego. If you can't defeat this urge, you are practically wearing earplugs and a blindfold. Your ability to persuade just stops dead in its tracks.
And the conflict here really just comes down to the science of cognitive load. We're looking at 2 deeply opposing states, focus on self versus focus on others. The human brain simply cannot process deep self-monitoring and high-level external empathy at 100% capacity at the same time. It's just neurologically impossible to deeply analyze your own anxiety while simultaneously reading the incredibly subtle emotional cues of the person sitting right across from you. You literally have to actively shift your cognitive bandwidth away from that inward-facing, blinding state of the narcissistic urge and push it over to the outward-facing state that's required to actually connect. You have to turn off the internal self-monitor to power up your external sensors.
All right, Section 3, developing emotional radar, looking outward. The exact phrasing from the source is super vital here. We are instructed to develop emotional radar. It's explicitly framed as a cultivatable, active skill, not just some innate talent you're born with. Think about how a physical radar actually operates. It constantly sweeps the environment, pinging the atmosphere to pick up these tiny, subtle blips and reflections that are completely invisible to the naked eye. Well, in human interaction, training this radar means learning to be a highly calibrated receiver of emotional data. So how do you actually do this? You start paying attention to the micro-level details. Maybe it's a sudden shift in a client's tone from really enthusiastic to a bit clipped. or a colleague crossing their arms and shallowing their breathing, or even just a microscopic hesitation before someone agrees to a deal. Developing emotional radar means shifting your focus so entirely onto the other person that you can read these silent data points in real time.
Which brings us to Section 4, making selling adjustments, adapting in real time.
So the framework now moves into a highly dynamic sequence. Step 1, as we just covered, is detecting signals with your emotional radar. Step 2 is immediately making what the text calls selling adjustments. Now, selling here isn't just about commerce, it's about selling an idea, maybe a compromise, or a vision. Let's look at a real-world scenario. Imagine you're 5 minutes into pitching this massive new initiative. Suddenly, your radar detects the key decision-maker leaning back, checking the clock, and totally avoiding eye contact. A selling adjustment means you instantly abandon your beautifully crafted 10-minute script. Actually, scratch that. You don't just abandon it, you pivot on a dime. You don't stubbornly push through. Instead, you cut straight to the return on investment. Or maybe you pause and ask them a direct question to re-engage their attention. You adapt your approach based entirely on the fresh emotional data you literally just collected.
And finally, Section 5, handling irresistible questions, the ultimate test.
This brings us to the real climax of the curriculum, learning to handle irresistible questions. This is, for sure, one of the most fascinating psychological concepts in the whole text. An irresistible question is essentially a trap. It's an emotionally charged provocation that baits you, intentionally triggering that exact narcissistic urge we talked about earlier. Think of a time a colleague suddenly challenged you in front of everyone with something like, "Why is your department always the bottleneck in these projects?" What happens? Your heart rate spikes, your ego flares up, and you desperately want to impulsively shout out a defensive list of excuses. That physiological response? That is the trap. Handling these questions requires immense discipline. You have to suppress your ego, maintain your emotional radar, and carefully adjust your response rather than just snapping back. It is the absolute pinnacle of conversational mastery.
So let's put the whole shebang together and synthesize this entire framework into a single cohesive narrative. Imagine how this plays out in a critical 10-second window during a tense negotiation. You walk in with a positive mind. As the negotiation starts, you actively suppress the narcissistic urge, which frees up your cognitive load to deploy your emotional radar. Boom, your radar detects hesitation in the room, so you immediately make a selling adjustment to soften your tone. Then, out of nowhere, the other party throws out an aggressive, irresistible question just to test you. But because your foundation is rock solid, you don't take the bait. You handle it smoothly and empathetically. These aren't just isolated tips, folks. They are interlocking gears in a high-performance machine, each skill building instantly upon the last to create profound, undeniable influence.
So I want to leave you with this one thought. How is your emotional radar functioning right now? The very next time you walk into a meeting, a negotiation, or heck, even just a casual conversation with a friend, ask yourself, are you succumbing to that narcissistic urge, or are you actively sweeping the room for signals? Are you ready to make instant adjustments? And can you handle those irresistible questions without losing your foundation? The blueprint for mastery is right here in front of us. Now it's totally up to you to put it to work. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to start applying this incredibly powerful framework to your own interactions today. See you next time.